Recording has been started.
Good morning, everyone in United States, and good evening to folks who are joining from India, and good day to everyone else from wherever they are joining. On behalf of the Council for Strategic Affairs, I'm inviting and welcoming all our audience members to our monthly roundtable discussion. And those of you who registered probably saw this flyer making an announcement about our today's roundtable discussion. And the topic for today's roundtable discussion is SethuSamudram Shipping Canal Project, Maritime Security, Counterterrorism, and Strategic Challenges. Today is February 11, 2023, Saturday, and we are here 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have three distinguished panelists that include Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla, Professor M.D. Nalapat, and Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan. A little bit about the Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. CSA encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. CSA condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide. And CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. Those of you who want more detailed information, please go to our website. The URL is listed here, www.councilforstrategicaffairs.org. We do a number of activities that include a monthly roundtable discussion that is held on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime. We have a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month. We organize symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. And finally, we do have an internship program for college students. Let me introduce our distinguished panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla. I have another picture of hers. Dr. Pusarla is a freelance writer, blogger, and strategic affairs analyst. She obtained a doctorate in life sciences from Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, Telangana. She worked as a research scientist at a company called CenBIOS. She swiftly transitioned from academic research to journalism with a very specific purpose. Over the last 8 to 9 years, she has published articles on international relations, politics, climate change, breakthrough science, sports, travelogues, book reviews, and other contemporary issues. She authored a book on foreign policy, a commentary on Modi government's unprecedented outreach and its outcome. She is currently editor-in-chief at MyIndMakers, a US-based web portal, although she is currently based in Bengaluru, India. And I'm proud to say that we have hosted her on our platform several times before. Our second distinguished speaker is Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan, and you'll be seeing him. This is another picture, more recent picture of Commodore Vasan. Commodore Vasan is a retired naval officer with combined distinguished experience of 34 years from Navy, Coast Guard, which includes staff, command, and instructional appointments. His appointments have included being Regional Commander of the Coast Guard Region East, Chief Staff Officer of Operations of Southern Naval Command, Commanding Officer of 2 naval air stations, a naval air squadron and warships, etc. For more than 9 years, he has been working in think tanks. He's working in the field of strategy and security, international relations, with a view to contribute to understanding of these issues, as well as to provide policy alternatives to stakeholders of any descriptions. His specialties include maritime and naval aviation background conferences, seminars. He has been associated with National Maritime Foundation, as well as with Chennai Center for China Studies, and he has been a distinguished director for the last several years of that China-focused think tank. And I'm very proud to say that he has also been on our platform several times, and he has encouraged me to publish on Chennai Center for China Studies website. Our last speaker is Professor M.D. Nalapat. Since I'm showing 2 pictures of all our distinguished experts, I'm going to show a picture of Professor Nalapat that you may be surprised to see. This is Professor Nalapat in his younger days. How handsome. Professor Nalapat was appointed India's Professor of Geopolitics in 1999 as the first UNESCO Peace Chairs in India at the Manipal University that he continues to hold today. He has also journalism experience. He has been editor of Mathrubhumi Daily and subsequently at Times of India. Currently, he is the editor-in-chief of the Sunday Guardian. He has focused on maritime security, defense. He is author of multiple books. The last one was Practice of Geopolitics, published by Manipal University. He published a book on great power dynamics in the 21st century in 2022. His specialization focuses on diplomacy, foreign policy, comparative studies, international political economy, international organizations, armed conflict, humanitarian relief, contemporary world history. He teaches courses related to these subjects and has over 900 publications in these domains. His writings have appeared in journals in the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and India, and most of them are on international affairs. He has his own website where his articles and books can be seen. That is listed here. Professor Nalapat has a very, very busy schedule. He has been on our platform several times. Currently, he is traveling in South Pacific Islands. And he had promised that if he is able to get connectivity and time in between meetings, he will be able to join for a few minutes. So his participation is conditional to a connectivity in whichever island he is, and if he's in meetings or not, but we'll be very fortunate if he is able to join us. I'll briefly introduce the subject before inviting our first domain expert. So SethuSamudram Shipping Canal Project, Maritime Security, Counterterrorism and Strategic Challenges. I'm not going to go into much details about history except for saying that this project was originally conceptualized in 1860 when India was under British occupation. And there have been a number of expert committees during the colonial years, and at least 5 or 6 since 1947. And the project has been debated, and there have been issues and objections. The opposition to SSSC project has been 5-fold so far. Some of the objections are very emotional, religious objections, but there have been objections also on fiscal and financial issues, ecological and environmental issues, which are also related to some biodiversity issues, and some of the maritime or marine experts have nautical issues with this particular project and have stated that it does not make nautical sense. So just to show you a picture, this is southern India, this is Sri Lanka, this is the Rameshwaram Island, this is Dhanushkoti, and this is the Ram Setu Bridge. Currently, the merchant marine vessels go across the southern tip of Sri Lanka from Bay of Bengal to go to Arabian Sea. So tonnage from Kolkata port has to reach to the Corin project. It has to go around Sri Lanka. And if there were a shipping canal like this, it would possibly bypass this route and go through this. There have been multiple routes suggested, at least 5 of them, which I've listed here. So this was an old article by Captain H. Balakrishnan in rediff.com, giving very detailed arguments that SethuSamudram shipping canal project does not make any nautical sense. This was an article by late Vice Admiral G.M. Hiranandani, who was Chief of the Coast Guards of India, again on talking about some of the maritime issues and other issues. And lastly, there's a recent article that came by an Indian journalist, P.K. Balachandran, who has lived in Sri Lanka for 21 years. And he has given Sri Lankan point of view. So again, I come back to this picture showing the current route and proposed shipping canal. I am going to invite our first panelist. There are some housekeeping rules. I would like everyone to.
Sorry. Yeah. With your permission.
Please, everyone, keep yourself muted. Please change your cell phone to muted setting. I see Professor Nalapat has been able to join. So in deference to his time, as I said, that he was going to be traveling in South Pacific Islands, connectivity is an issue. He is advising several Pacific Island governments. So I'm going to change the sequence, and instead of inviting Dr. Pusarla, I will invite Professor Madhav Nalapat first, because we don't want to tax his time for 1.5 hours. So Professor Nalapat, please go ahead. Floor is yours. I'm glad you are able to join. So you are on mute. Kindly unmute yourself.
Yes, I'd like to say that, out of respect for the forum that you lead and yourself, of course, I have to join, but it's way past 11 o'clock here where I am, and I must tell you with some amusement and regret that unfortunately no one wants my advice, no one listens to it anywhere in the world, and although of course I'm very freely giving advice, both. In various forms. So I would just like to, make that point of fact. I really, it's a little late and I've got an early morning meeting. Unfortunately, there's a lot of activity happening in the South Pacific. And so meetings begin quite early in the morning, and breakfast is the very untimely hour of around 8 o'clock. So there is again a breakfast meeting despite it being a Sunday. But so if you don't mind, I just want to say one small point, and with your permission, sign off for the night, frankly, because I mean, as I said, meetings begin early, begins late, and if you're here in locations for a limited period of time, unfortunately, your schedule is very clogged up. I simply want to say that I think it's very important that we discuss the SethuSamudram project in the light of the Ram Setu. The reality is that, we can say it is religious, we can say it is various other things, but the reality of situation is not religious. At that point in time, I don't think you could call it a particular faith. It's, or a tag or something. It's historical. It's, in my view, historical. It's a piece of history that has remained across so many millennia. And it's part of the process of educating us about our history and part of the process of teaching us who we are as a people. So I'm informed by experts that there are channels available which do not do any harm to the Ram Setu. And if this is the case, most definitely. But some others tell me that it means that the tonnage may be a little less or whatever is the situation. I'm not a maritime expert at all, unlike the other speakers here, so I can't comment on that. But I would like to point out that it's much more than a simple engineering or nautical question. I've heard the nautical arguments, I've heard the question about silting, I've heard various other arguments against this particular project. I've heard that over years, especially when, if I may say so, under the Vajpayee government, this was pushed very actively uh, by by the Marans, who were one of whom was, in fact, I think, a government in the government there, and the DMK. I presume the same thing is happening now. But I'd like to point out that, you know, our history has been so badly mauled, mutilated, and defaced and destroyed. You go to Europe, you find little bits and pieces of history lovingly tended, little bits and pieces of recreated history. Now, in China, for example, a lot of the Great Wall of China was built, I mean, in past decades, not in past millennia, but it's there as a sign to the Chinese people of what they are. And I think it's important for our people to understand what we are. I'm happy that a start has been made. The Archaeological Survey of India had the same list of significant monuments that they had during the British time. And I'm told about a third of those were the grave sites of British soldiers. Now, the British soldiers died in fighting Indians. There's no question that each death is a tragedy. There's no question that those grave sites should be tended properly. But whether they are of the same historical significance to India as it is to Britain is a matter for debate. That now there's a relook at all that, a relook at these historical sites. So I only want to say to the distinguished experts here, we are talking in terms of a composite idea of India. We are talking in terms of a composite plan, of a mindset that needs to be created in our people. And even in the development of science, especially in the development of science, if I may say so, it is very important to understand one's own history across the years. I think to divide, periods by religion, that everything that happened before a certain period was Hindu, everything that happened again, and between that period and the British was Muslim, and thereafter it was, I don't know, it was the British or the Western or the Christian or whatever you call it. I think this is a small, if I may say so, oversimplification of our history. Every one of us is part of the overall history of India, whether it is the British period, whether it is the Mughal period, whether it is the Vedic period. All are very important components of our history. And it's important for us to think in terms of these 6,000 years of unbroken history and to accept that in our DNA, in our cultural DNA, every one of these periods is in every one of us. Now, for me, the way I look at it, I've been saying this for decades, the Sri Ram Setu, the Ramayana, these are not religious epics. If they were, I can assure you, they wouldn't be as popular in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, even in Vietnam, in Indonesia, as they are. If they're religious epics, certainly not. These are epics. You have Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. These are epics of history, if I may say so. You have the epics of the time of the Caesars, the Roman Empire. These are epics. But unlike what has happened with the relics of the Roman Empire have been lovingly protected and preserved, our relics have been destroyed. There's been I would say, by the British, understandably, a callous indifference to them. And I would say an administrative indifference after that until very recently. So I would, as I said, my respect for you, Professor Adityanjee, I mean, makes me ensure that I'm going to go a little groggy from lack of sleep and a bit bleary-eyed to my breakfast conference. But that is a small sacrifice to make for my regard and respect for you. I would like to say, please understand, the SethuSamudram project, I don't know if it involves Ram Setu or not, but I can assure you it's not simply a canal cutting through X or Y or silt or desilting. It's a living part of Indian history. Many living parts of Indian history have been killed. I mean, you cross the Kurukshetra fields and then you don't even know what is the Kurukshetra fields. I'm not sure that a majority of our population even knows what Kurukshetra is all about, barring that it's possibly a university. That's about it. Where was Nalanda? Now you have Nalanda, which has come back. And frankly, it has come back as a generic, and not even as a mutant, as something entirely different from the past. So all I can say, quite frankly, is, I have a feeling, in my personal view, that we need to be a little more respectful of our history. And we need to be more respectful of those few elements of our history that survived from a long ago period, despite our neglect, despite callous the attitude of the colonial people, despite, frankly, the administrative ennui that we have had in India, that the colonial list of significant monuments and objects has continued for more than 100 years, lovingly tended by, and the ASI, if I may say so, is one of the most grossly underfunded organizations in the government of India and underappreciated. No wonder they can do so little, and no wonder so many of the monuments under ISI are unknown to all of us when they could make us proud. And they are neglected because the ASI is simply not given the money to ensure that they are given the respect they deserve. So I want to appeal to my distinguished co-panelists. Both of them are many, many times more expert in this particular domain than I am. The more I speak, the more I'll reveal my ignorance of the subject that you have asked me to speak about. All I can say, please, Dr. Adityanjee, it's not sentiment, it's not religion. It is frankly, a living part of our history. One can argue that one can possibly walk better, if you fix with one eye, or you can, basically, if you lose one arm, the other arm becomes stronger, or the other leg becomes quite likely. I don't know. I mean, fortunately, as yet, I haven't lost an arm or a leg, or even though there are a few cataract issues I've got at this point in time of my age, I haven't yet lost any one of my eyes. But it could be. But frankly, for me, as a world citizen, the Ram Setu belongs to the whole world. Lord Ram belongs to the whole world. To call Lord Ram a Hindu, to call Lord Ram an Indian or belonging to India, is to call, if I may say so, the ancient Greek gods and goddesses just Greek, the ancient Roman heroes just Romans. Abraham Lincoln, I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the inscriptions in one of my books is to Abraham Lincoln. He was not a citizen of my country. My country was not even independent when he was the president. He was a citizen of your country, but he's my Abraham Lincoln. There's Mahatma Gandhi. I've gone to America many times, and for them, it's their Mahatma Gandhi. For Martin Luther King, it was his Mahatma Gandhi. For me, it is my Martin Luther King. So from that point of view, I humbly request my distinguished co-panelists, please understand there's a lot more than sentiment, there's a lot more than religion, and it's a lot more, frankly, than a slightly more convenient shipway. We cannot destroy living history, especially when so much of our living history across has been destroyed over the past millennia, I would say, centuries, maybe even decades. Having said that, again, I apologize for my rudeness in having to sign off. But, I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not one of those alert chaps who can sleep for 4 hours a day. I need my 6 hours a day of sleep, unfortunately. I wish I were, maybe like Professor Adityanjee, 4 hours, but no, I'm 6 hours. And just privately and secretly, if I get 8 hours, I'm much happier than if I get 6 hours. So, having come to this South Pacific, and again to other shores of the Pacific, certain places that are not, whose security is under challenge. Uh, I'd only like to say, out of the days that I've been here, about six, one day I've had 8 hours, and 4 days I've had 6 hours, and one day less than 2 hours. So I would like to keep that average reasonably high. So please, Dr. Adityanjee, please, my distinguished co-panelist, the Commodore is an old friend of mine and a very brilliant individual. And I've heard of Dr. Pusarla, and I've heard, and I'm really delighted to be in her company. And I do hope that she will. I mean, I am actually. I'm the editorial director of the ITV network, and yes, Sunday Guardian is part of that network. I hope you're going to be reading the paper online in a few hours. But I'm honored to be among these two experts. I'm not an expert, but I do believe I'm an Indian, and I do believe I'm a world citizen, both. And as an Indian, as a world citizen, please, Dr. Adityanjee, don't forget the Sri Ram Setu. Bless you, God bless you, and God bless your country, the United States. God bless my country, India. God bless all of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nalapat, for very passionate but very relevant, very important historical argument. Most of us forget about history. And if I may quote George Santayama, those who forget the lessons of history are condemned to repeat it. So Professor Nalapat reminded us about importance of history, and that's a very, very relevant argument on this particular discussion. Now it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla. She will be talking about this proposed project and terrorism and counter-terrorism related issues. So Dr. Pusarla, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Namaste, everybody, and it's like really a delight and pleasure to be back addressing, to be a part of the panel experts of CSA. And Namaste, Commodore Vasanji. It's been we have connected earlier as well, and so it's a real pleasure to be back with you. So just jumping into the topic, I just want to start uh, my my perspective on this with this small quote from Alfred Theis Mahan. Whoever controls the Indian Ocean dominates Asia. This ocean is the key to seven seas in 21st century. The destiny of the world will be decided in these waters. So on the face of it, it looks like India has that chance to reclaim through the Sethu Samudram Shipping Canal project, which was conceived as rightly said by Dr. Adityanjee in 1860, but they have immediately junked it in 1870, and instead they have started working on the Pamban Canal. Be as it may, but I just want to tell you that, like, even after India obtained independence in 1955, the first committee was appointed to look into to assess the feasibility of the project, and from there onwards, this project was intricately tied with the building of port at Tuticorin, as well as together the canal and the port can function in tandem. So in 1963, the port was given a go-ahead, and then the construction has started. But then this, as pointed out by Professor Madhav Nalapat, this meant this is a highly, I wouldn't say a sentimental issue. It is a living monument which would continuously remind us of our history. So be as it may, so this issue has been taken to the Supreme Court, And then I don't want to go into what has happened in Supreme Court and how it was ruled out. In which favor in whose favor the Supreme Court has delivered its verdict. But I would like to say that the discussion about SethuSamudram project has again is now dominating the headlines, because in the past couple of months, a plea was a plea was put in Supreme Court saying that Ramasetu should be declared as a national monument, and Supreme Court immediately replied that central government alone can do it, and pending central government's decision on the same, Tamil Nadu Assembly has passed a resolution demanding the construction of this canal project. So it was believed that it was said that all parties have supported this resolution, but then later on BJP has clarified that it is not in favor of the canal project if it is going to cause any damage to Ramasetu. So that is what has happened till now. So now I just want to focus on the counter-terrorism aspect of it. So to run through you to these counter-terrorism challenges, I just wanted to take you through the chronology of events that would eventually connect us or lead us to have a kind of an idea, like whether we should have this canal project, or like we should say bid a goodbye to it. Okay. So the terrorism, since independence, India has been victim of terrorism, and then it has been at various forms raising the issue that terrorism is going to be a threat. But till terrorism struck the lands of America, world hasn't taken this threat from terrorism very seriously. So immediately in the aftermath of 9/11 incident, countries have realized that global commons have to be protected. So in lieu of it, International Maritime Organization has established International Ship and Port Facility, that is ISPS code, wherein it has set some kind of a regulations to help and detect any kind of threats to international shipping. But it has been the regulation has been relatively good, but then what was the main flaw in that was like it has excluded vessels less than 500 tons and all fishing vessels regarding of their size. So this has turned out into another, this flaw has resulted in a major catastrophe, and that is I'll just come back to it little later. But in between, after in 2004, I'm just bringing so many things together, but I would like to combine these dots, connect these dots, and then put a perspective about it. That was what has been happening globally and in the subcontinent. When tsunami hit in 2004, under the banner of charitable organization, LET's, that is Lashkar-e-Taiba's charitable wing, Falai-Insan, have made it to the Sri Lanka and slowly established its feet in Sri Lanka. So Falai-Insan, under the banner of charity, has been slowly radicalizing people. So that is one aspect of it. Now coming back to how this flaw has turned out into a disaster, Pakistani LET cadres have used this flaw, and then in 2008 they have they entered Indian shores through shipping vessels, and then they have inflicted a major damage in the form of Mumbai attacks, which claimed 166 lives. So that has been the offshoot of how a maritime terrorism could even strike a danger to an otherwise peaceful land. So, so following 2611, India has established a committee, that is NCMS, and then it has brought together all the stakeholders for collective solutions to have a check on to arrive at various coastal to have an understanding of coastal security challenges, and have tried to address the issue of interagency cooperation and their coordination. So in the aftermath, they have strengthened the coastal guards, marine police, and other marine agencies, and even they have prioritized national coastal radar chain. And they have set up joint operation centers to monitor the exchange of information. And further, they have issued some color coding to the fishing boats, who have helped the security agencies in better monitoring of the coast. So that has been the case. And then back in Pakistan, I'll be drifting here and there, but then finally, as I told you, I would be connecting all these dots. Back in Pakistan in 2011, TTP and Al Qaeda together have attacked PNS Mehran, and then and immediately that is a big naval asset, and then they have destroyed it. After that, again in 2014, they have struck another naval asset in Karachi. So this is to say that Pakistani terror agencies have been slowly acquiring those needed assets which are essential to strike terror through waters. So it is to say that the maritime terrorism is alive, and then it is and the dangers from maritime threats are going to be imminent to the subcontinent. So after that, there have been subsequent similar maritime attacks even in other places in Southeast Asia as well. So this has alerted countries saying that this is going to be a major threat. So after that, countries have again focused on what are the measures and regulations that can be done to protect these global commons. So thankfully, because of this, some kind of a coordination between various countries, the threat levels have come down. But again, the terror struck in form of an attack on naval base in Dhaka. In the aftermath of attack on Dhaka, Bangladesh has immediately urged for coordinated, that is coordinated patrols with India. Subsequently, India has also started doing coordinated patrols with Thailand, Indonesia, and Myanmar, and Bangladesh as well. So that was one aspect of it. So that was one aspect of a terror, and then the another aspect which has been quietly breeding is like the entry of some several radical elements into Sri Lanka. So as I have reiterated, it has been first the Lashkar-e-Toiba has entered the region in 2004, and subsequently what has happened was the global terrorism has also began to impact small countries like Sri Lanka, which has got a great strategic great strategic importance. So it was in the form of around the same time, I mean to say by the end of 2015, when Islamic terror was sufficiently decapitated and then destabilized, all those cadres of Islamic State started moving back to their native countries. And from there, they have started adapted what is called as a Foucaultist vanguard strategy, wherein they believed that now that their movement for their movement to be successful, they have to start gaining the sympathy and also support of the people around them. So from there onwards, from 2016 onwards, there has been some shift in the kind of like what we can call it as a conventional terrorism to the kind of a modern terrorism, which we mean, which is like radicalization and indoctrination of people far and wide, located in different places through internet or through social media channels. So again, putting things into perspective, I have broached this issue because like this indoctrination and radicalization has caused the Easter bomb attacks in Sri Lanka in 2019, which in its scale is deemed to be as the next disastrous event after 9/11. This has claimed seven blasts occurred simultaneously in the island, and then that claimed the lives of over 350 people. So, investigations after the attacks have revealed that, like, the agencies or the terror groups which are responsible for these Easter bomb attacks are like the ones which are radicalized or radicalized elements, and they have close links with the terror elements which are already existing in South India. So here I want to say that like the conventional terrorism has always been there. And then Pakistan has been using this conventional terrorism, so to say that like penetration of jihadists to different regions so that they can launch an attack from those regions on the other countries. Like I mean to say Pakistan always wanted to use Sri Lanka to launch attacks on India. So this aspect, I mean, while Pakistan would always say that this has been an allegation, but this has become crystal clear when, like, the NIA in India has unraveled a plot and then successfully have nipped it in its bud. That is like the Pakistani um, High Commissioner who was posted in Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka, has been slowly trying to build a terror module, wherein what he has done is he has co-opted Sri Lankan Muslims and then sent two of them to India via Maldives to launch an attack on consulate U.S. and Israeli consulates in Bangalore. So, but timely intelligence alerts have like helped us to unearth this and also expose Pakistan's intentions towards India, that is like containing India and also to launch cross-border attacks from wherever it is possible. So, so this is to say that like the maritime terrorism, which has been long dismissed, is not like a stretch of imagination. While there have been isolated incidents, and most of us are forced to believe that these kind of threats are more or less there in parts of Africa, but and then Southeast Asia. But then the threat is imminent to India as well, and then this is how Pakistan has been using India to launch attacks. While Pakistan is one form of a threat which we can anticipate coming from South, there is another major threat which we can anticipate is from LTTE. LTTE was like after the civil war in 2008, LTT was LTT has lost most of its force, and the people started moving to different places, and it has lost its charm with the people as well. But now recently, like as old as in December 2022, Indian agencies have seized a ship close to Vinnincham port, where they have found out that the drug cartel gangs which are operating from Pakistan are using LTT cadres to again to carry on drug trafficking. It is widely known that there is a nexus between these terror agencies and drug cartels. This is to say that the threat from Sri Lanka hasn't disappeared in any form with the weakening of LTTE, but this has also given a clue that, like a major hint, that LTTE is regrouping and it is reviving. So this is one part of a thing which I want to say, that like maritime threat is there for India from Sri Lanka. But I want to switch gears and would want to bring to your notice that there is another form of a terrorism which is like in play right now, other than the conventional terrorism. That is like terrorism, which is terror groups which are now using the advanced technology to carry out attacks. No longer people are operating as groups, but they are operating as individual units or individual entities from across different parts of the country or across different parts of the world as well. So this is to say that even if we believe that like having a when that we have a maritime terror from Sri Lanka, and even if we suppose that after post 2611 we have strengthened our security forces so that like we can defend our country, our national security, even if we go ahead with the canal which is going to be like as per some reports, it is the canal is going to be like just 30 kilometers away from LTT bases. So LTT is known to have both the capabilities to launch both the marine attacks and aerial attacks. So it is imminent that if we go ahead with the canal, there is every likely possibility that the canal is going to face all kinds of dangers from the LTTE and from the Pakistani jihadists. Not Pakistani jihadists directly, but the ISI has been coordinating with the Sri Lankan groups to launch attack on India. While this is one part of it, another part is like they are using advanced technologies to carry on a terror operation, and this is most evident post COVID, when like even in India, when we have seen that like the foiled Coimbatore blast recently and Mangaluru blast now have points out that like terrorists wherever they are going to be a threat. So considering these threats, if we are to believe that building a canal and providing it is with the security we can avert it, it is no longer going to happen. So the agencies are there, the agents are there, but then like the terrorism and the threat from terrorism is always there. So taking into consideration like all other aspects, it wouldn't be a safe bet if we go with a canal project, because like even the existing countries which have well developed ports, even the developed countries are unable to safeguard their ports from these terror attacks and infiltrations which are happening. And I would just sum up and conclude it by saying that even the so-called ports which are there in the Gulf are highly protected. Despite having a highly protected ports, Houthis have managed to hit tankers of Saudi Arabia. So counterterrorism, I think, can be considered as like one of the challenges, but then the canal project cannot be likely influenced by these kind of threats because the threats are imminent. And further, I would like to add that like a report in 2022 by a German shipping agency have found out that this is the last sentence. The a German shipping agency German shipping agency have through their research have found out that there are absolutely zero maritime attacks in the later half of 2022. Okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pusarla, for elaborating the terrorism threats and counterterrorism measure and the risk we would be taking if the Canal project was to be operationalized and implemented. Now we are very pleased to have Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan, who is going to talk about maritime security and maritime challenges. Commodore Vasan, the floor is yours. I welcome you.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and thanks to also the previous panelists, Dr. Haritha and our own good friend Nalapat, for setting the stage for further discussions. My job has been made simpler, particularly with the slides that were shown by Dr. Adityanjee, which we can imagine things better as to what the orientation was and what are the issues that are involved from the time it was conceived as something that would reduce the distance. The basic requirement at that time when it was conceived was to reduce the distance of travel around Sri Lanka to reach ports, like Tuticorin, and also the. So, however, the main issues that we have today is on the so-called connectivity between Gulf of Mannar and Park Bay is replete with a lot of dangers. And in fact, in the National Maritime Foundation inaugural issue, way back in 2009, I think, or even earlier. So I had written an article on the utility of SethuSamudram project. And this copy was handed over to the Supreme Commander, then Abdul Kalamji. And, being from that area, from Ramanathapuram district, he appreciated the article and he sent me a separate letter at that time. But, 15 years down the line, when I revisit my own article, I find that we have to revisit this. I had recommended that this be implemented mainly from the point of view of livelihood, connectivity, and our own maritime forces, which would be better equipped to see that this is used as something that will counter the LTTI, which was predominant at that time. No, it works both ways. If you have access, so has the LTT. Or the other way around, if the LTT has access, so have you the access. So this is the gist of the argument at that time, and more importantly, to say that the distance that is going to be cut off with this was substantial saving. But subsequent calculations by my good friend who did staff course with me, Captain H. Balakrishnan, who would have joined us today. I was very keen that he joins because he had actually sat down on a chart and worked out the advantages or disadvantages of this connectivity. And he was convinced that there's hardly any advantage as far as high tonnage ships are concerned. Because, at that time when this was conceived, we are still looking at ships with draft of 15 meters, 16 meters, 17 meters. And the Canal, the SSCP itself was designed to have 17-meter draft. So today the TEUs, that is the 20-foot equivalent units which are carried on the ships, number 23,000 TEUs. That's a kind of the ship that is used today for, and there's no way that ship can transit the SSCP. And increasingly, something like 63% of the global traffic now is on containers. So if those container ships cannot go through the SSCP, where have you saved any distance or cost? Also, the other point that was discussed widely at that time in private forums, of which I was also in the panel, was that while you say that there is reduction in time, the moment you convert it into a restricted passage with limited kit, there are buoys on either side. It is a controlled passage, almost like the Suez Canal, or in a controlled channel, and therefore the number of ships that can go through would always be limited. It will require a pilot, like in a entrance to a Chennai port or Mumbai port, where there are restricted passages. You will require a pilot to board a ship and then take it through this. He has to reduce the speed at which this entire process is done. There have to be support tugs which are ready to come into the air. They also have to worry about the fact that there could be accidental collisions or grounding of huge ships, which would be an ecological environmental disaster. So no, these, when you consider all these facts, the disadvantages, I would say, far outweigh the so-called advantages that were expected. So turning to the terrorism aspect, I think Dr. Haritha has covered all this in an excellent manner. The fact that after Mumbai terror attack, we have a fairly comprehensive security architecture, whether it is in the form of the Maritime Domain Awareness Program, or in the form of coastal radar networks which are there, or in the form of revamping the Coastal Security Group, the Coast Guard and the Indian Navy under one umbrella, and also the recent appointment of the Indian Maritime Security Coordinator, Vice Admiral Ashok Kumar. This is something that the Navy and the Coast Guard had been asking for a long time, and I am happy that this has come through. He is the one who is going to look at the activities of all the agencies in the maritime domain. You have fishery sector, you have port sector, you have blue economy stakeholders, you have the Navy, the Coast Guard, the customs. So there are too many players in the maritime domain, and it's not that their activities are synchronized. So it's from that point of view that the IMSC has been out of. So at that time, when when LTT was quite active, there were a lot of apprehensions about, if you have the SSCP going, the LTT will have free access to our coast. This was a valid observation at that time, because they had shallow craft which was available, and they were in a position to intercede any vessel which was traveling there. So I remember at that time I was the regional commander of the Coast Guard, and I had called on the Chief Minister Jayalalitha, who wanted to discuss these dimensions of security, both related to the SSCP as well as the land bridge, which was proposed by Ranil Wickremesinghe at that time. I don't know, maybe I personally feel that we lost an opportunity to have this kind of a connectivity over land, because at that time the LTT was still active and there were apprehensions about what would happen if you connect the Indian subcontinent with Sri Lanka. But I feel that perhaps we lost a golden opportunity, because technology was available for you to have those kind of high bridges, which allowed connectivity, Jaffna, the Northern Peninsula, and there would have been greater people-to-people contact, trade and commerce activity, which would have also brought in its own security to a certain extent, because both sides would be involved parties and they would be stakeholders. So, however, I think at that time, because of the LTT threat, the proposal that came from Sri Lanka for having a land bridge was not approved by India. And the SSCP itself, which was approved at that time, I'm well aware, sitting in Chennai, as to who were the people who were interested in this. They were all the political people, including Balu, I will take names here, who were interested in the dredging contracts. Because it's not only the initial dredging that was to take place, but it was also the maintenance dredging, which would go on for year-on basis. And where were you going to dump all this dredged material? Because it was going to cause a phenomenal amount of environmental disaster. Because these areas are where you have corals, and you have 400 species of biodiversity species which are there, and all that would be destroyed. That is a very valid concern. Another important aspect which came about was on tsunami impact. There is a scholar called Tad Murthy who has done a lot of the research on how tsunami would impact if there was a canal, SSCP. So after 2004, when these diagrams were calculated and computer simulations were done, he feels that it's thanks to the presence of the present contours also of the Ram Setu, that a lot of this was deflected and our southern coast was saved. Whereas if you had a canal there, there would be free flow of the entire volume of water, and that would create some kind of a funnel effect, and there would be greater damage to the coasts of India as well as Sri Lanka. So this was proved based on computer models by Tad Murthy. It's available freely online. You can have a look at it when. So it's not that there were no environmental concerns. It's not that there were no concerns about cost. They're not just the investment cost initially, but also the recurring cost which is required for maintenance dredging. Even today, if you go to Kolkata, they say is a dead port. Why? Because you are not able to dredge that area. The Hooghly dumps in so much of material that needs to be dredged, and therefore over the years, decade on decade, you find that the depth of Hooghly River has come down. So the navigable channels have come down, and most of this has shifted to Paradip. So, no, these are the practical considerations of why we should not unnecessarily try to do SSAP. Now, let me come to the naval angle. Because I happen to be the Chief Staff Officer Operations in Southern Naval Command when Kargil happened. And we wanted to reposition the entire Eastern Fleet on the West Coast. Some of the arguments that were proposed earlier was that if you had a SSCP, they could go through this and, cut down the time. But because of the practical considerations which I brought out earlier about the speed being hauled, but also not that the entire fleet can go there. Whereas the Eastern Fleet at that time when we wanted to mobilize them during Kargil operation, were able to move at 20 knots, 25 knots, which you cannot do in a canal. So yes, you had to go around Sri Lanka, right? That I agree. Maybe it added to the distance, but it did not add to the time. On the contrary, we saved on time, and we also saved on the integrity of the fleet in terms of their ability to move as a battle group which was able to protect itself. So there would be greater vulnerability if you are trying to use the SSCP for transit of warships from one coast to the other. So this is something that must be borne in mind. Now coming to the other aspects of ISI operation, which Dr. Haritha also brought out, this is something that we must factor. Not only during the the blast that took place in 2019, the Easter bombings, but even otherwise, if you go back 7-8 years of report, there's phenomenal amount of activity of the ISI using Tamil Muslims who are in Sri Lanka and the local people, and who are carrying out complete monitoring activity in the Tamil Nadu coast. People are arrested, and they were seen close to the officers training academy. They were seen close to the Coast Guard establishments. They were seen near nuclear establishment in Kalpakam. They were seen in the naval establishments here. And so there's a phenomenal amount of recce that was carried out. Why would you carry out a recce unless you had some intentions to carry out this bombing, just on the lines of the Easter bombing? So not everything is hunky-dory when it comes to the ISA activities, and so we needed to be on guard all the time about the possibility of Sri Lanka being used as a launching ground for sustaining their terrorist activities in the southern India. Dr. Haritha also made a reference to the Coimbatore blast, the Mangalore blast. All these are, there is a pattern. It's not that it's happening out of the blue. There's a pattern, and it was also supported by a serving defense attaché in Sri Lanka, who was asked to go back to Pakistan after India provided proof about his complicity in recruiting people who came for visas. So, so the plot is quite thick out there in terms of the possibility of terrorist attacks being launched from Sri Lanka. Please also remember the Chinese angle. That's another thing that cannot be ruled out. Not only do they have Hambantota, the recent reports suggest that, I think I shared this report in CSA, I'm not sure, but there's a phenomenal amount of investments that are being done by China with fishermen on Sri Lanka side who are not happy with the Indian fishermen, their counterparts, because there's regular poaching there. So they are providing a lot of money and expertise for breeding sea cucumbers in captivity. And that is a revenue generation for the Sri Lankan fishermen, and therefore there is a security angle. In the sense that if Chinese have bought the goodwill of these people by investments and money investment, they could be motivated to act against Indian interests, whether it's commercial shipping, whether it is something that's going through the SSCP as and when it happens, or even for that matter to indulge in enhanced activities of drug smuggling, human trafficking, and arms smuggling, which happened. When the LTT was there, this was regular. We had a challenge all the time in monitoring this. The good news on this score is that it happened in 2002 when we were able to get the air cushion vessels or the hovercraft to be positioned in Bangladesh border, in Sri Lanka border, and in Pakistan border, and they've been augmented. These were brought from UK, and they have the shallow water capability. They came in 2002 and I was the regional commander. They did not come because I was the regional commander. These plans were already afoot. I just happened to be there, and these were inducted. And I have physically gone all the way across from Chennai to this place in a hovercraft to look at the feasibility of their operations, which the Coast Guard has perfected this in the last 20 years. In fact, there was joint operations where we were able to nab some of the smugglers who used to dump these in many of those thieves. We call them the Musal Thivu, the Sandatane Thivu, and whatever. They would dump these and retrieve it later. But if the hovercraft there, things have become difficult. Please also remember that there is one dedicated Coast Guard station at Mandapam, and there is one dedicated Coast Guard station at Tuticorin. That's one in Parkway and one in Gulf of Mannar. And both of them have the ability to keep constant checks on this. In addition, we have a naval air station, Purandu, in Ramanathapuram. From there, we use drones regularly. The Israeli Heron and searchers were used regularly from there. It's in the public domain. I'm not giving you any secrets there. And they were used regularly to keep continuous monitoring of the traffic, the fisheries vessels, etc. The problem are related to monitoring the fisheries vessels. It's not so much. How much time do you have, Dr. Adityanjee? I think you're muted.
You can conclude in 5 more minutes.
Thank you. So, the other point is, the most important point for me is the threat from fishermen, in the sense that they are our own, but today they are violating the international maritime boundary line which was drawn in 74. They are going into Sri Lankan waters. They are poaching there, and this has made it very difficult for people-to-people relations. And please also note that the fishermen on the other side, whether it's Jaffna or Delft Island or whatever, they're Tamils. That means Tamil fishermen from here are moving into areas which are required by Tamils. And also our own fishermen have not been responsible fishermen. They've been using dredgers, and there is hardly any fish left on our side. So therefore, they want to go on the Sri Lankan side where the fish catch is slightly better, including off Kachativu where they quote historical rights. So the fishermen, as was brought out by Dr. Haritha, they do have a color scheme, etc. But the point is that electronically, when we want to monitor them, and internationally, there is what's called the automated identification system, which is compulsorily to be used on big ships above 20 meters. It applies to fishing vessels as well. But the smaller vessels, most of them, the smaller fishermen which are there, they are, it's not yet made compulsory. Though the center and the state have said we will, ensure that it's given free for cost, they do not want to be tracked. It's very simple. If I can track him, I will tell him that you are in Sri Lankan water, therefore some of the compensation, some of the subsidies that you are entitled to will not come your way. So why would he switch on that AIS even if you gave it for free? So they are the ones who've been involved in drug smuggling, in human trafficking. Remember, there were many attempts by these fishermen in untrustworthy boats, unseaworthy boats, to take people all the way to Australia. And we have foiled some of those attempts over here. So these issues of non-traditional threats, as perpetuated by fishermen, will continue to be the focus of the security agencies. Things have improved, but we need to constantly worry about the Chinese angle. We need to worry about the fact that they're lobbying with fishermen, and therefore would these fishermen, with or without the SSCP, become a burden or become a security challenge is what we have to look at. The only reassuring factor that I can tell you all is that whether it is Hambantota or whether it's any of the installation that is likely to be used by China, all of them are within the striking range of us even without us stepping on Sri Lanka. Unlike the IPKF, where we had to go there and fight a war. No, all these are Hambantota is included, is within the striking range of all our defense forces. I'm not saying that we will attack Hambantota, but if Hambantota starts supporting military forces in times of hostility, it becomes a target, without Sri Lanka. So, coming back to the core topic of the which I'll wind up now on the SSCP is that today, when I revisit the entire issue of terror-related activities because of SSCP, I would say that there is no need for an SSCP, particularly with the way the Merchant Navy has expanded to carry more ships. And with that kind of draft, they will not be able to transit through SSCP. The warships which are required to use this smaller channel, only smaller draft vessels can use it. The smaller minesweepers or the frigates or whatever can use it because most of them are below 15 meters. The bigger ships like the carriers or those ones which carry hull-mounted sonars will not be able to transit. Also, as a composite fleet, the entire integrity of the fleet would be compromised if you are sending them one by one as targets. So therefore, I would rather have a complete group which is sailing together, even if it's around Sri Lanka. And therefore, the necessity for SSCP, though it has come back because of the DMK over here, is something I think is best put to rest. And with that, I rest my case. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Commodore Vasan, for very, very lucid explanation. Using my position as moderator, I have no qualms in saying that implementation of this project and completion of this project will create a permanent security and strategic challenge to India's larger geopolitical interests and compromise the safety of India. We have known what happened in 26/11, where those terrorists came. They did not come through land, they did not come through air, they came through the sea route. So the problem of security is paramount. If the nation does not exist, there are no commercial interests. There are commercial interests because the nation exists. So it's very, very important to shell the project once for all because of serious security threats from ISI, from possibly a rump remnant of LTTE. Well, right now it is subdued, but it may not be subdued tomorrow. What happens when you have this shipping channel and a resurgent LTT, quote unquote, sea tigers, which had 3,000, sea tigers at that point in time with small boats, hijacks these some of, commercial vessels and abducts the mariners and demands, ransom from the hostages. So there are a lot of issues that we have really not talked about. There is definitely threat from China. I would not actually emphasize that. Threat from China is paramount for India's security interests. And it is not just from LAC. People who say that China is too far from Indian Ocean is really not true. I'm going to bring another direct, dimension to this Chinese threat. From 1677, the Thailand monarchy has toyed with the idea of Canal. And at this point in time in 2015, China, as part of BRI, has been pushing Thailand to implement the Canal project, which will give China direct entry into Indian Ocean, bypassing the Malacca dilemma. So any strategic threat from China in Indian Ocean cannot be underemphasized. There are other geopolitical considerations, and I will bring that. The government of Sri Lanka is not happy for various reasons if SSC Canal project was to be implemented. And their objections are not just religious, not sentimental, not just commercial. They have concerns about biodiversity. They have other concerns also. And the last thing you want is you implement this canal project and Sri Lanka goes to UNCLOS and files an international case against India. You are bringing it to international arbitration when you have no hold left. And if UNCLOS gives a judgment, you have to obey that judgment. So you are intentionally internationalizing something which is bilateral between India and Sri Lanka. By bringing UNCLOS, you will be bringing superpower influence. And I think that would be the gravest folly any government of India will commit. by implementing SSC project. Canal, as I said, in Thailand has been talked about since 1677 by different versions of Thai monarchy. And every time the issue is that it is not fiscally, financially viable project. But even if China was to put $1 trillion, it will create a security threat to India because China will have direct access to Indian Ocean, bypassing the Malacca Strait. Why do you want to give China access to the, Gulf of Mannar and Park Bay, seaway, which cannot actually accommodate larger vessels at this point in time? So you cannot have actually maritime or military significance of these waters. So I am, as moderator, very convinced that implementation of this project should be shelved once for all in the interests of national security. All the commercial interests of various political families and, invoking the regionalism Tamil interests or Tamil Nadu's commercial interests. And, if the amount of money that is going to be spent on building this canal in today's rupee or dollar, an amount that would be required for continuous dredging of the channel, making security arrangements, if that amount of money was invested in southern Indian, coastal townships, you will be able to, uplift the economy of that particular region. The canal would be an invitation to terrorists, foreign influences, and will internationalize a bilateral situation. Even if government of Sri Lanka today gives permission, there is no guarantee that next party that comes to power will not internationalize, because they've already threatened to invoke UNCLOS if India were to go ahead. And you don't want to have a World Bank like situation that we file do a bilateral, agreement with Pakistan, but invoke a multilateral agency and lose the control to multilateral agency, where you are actually losing the, the water resources of Indian rivers to Pakistan. I think it will be highly stupid, highly myopic, and does not take into consideration the security interests of India. So with those comments, I will read some of the questions that have been asked. Ashutosh Gupta wants to ask, is it correct that the proposed canal will take ships only up to 30,000 tons, while most of all the ships now are over 40,000 tons? Yes, the canal, as planned, will take only ships less than 30,000 tonnage. The depth to which the dredging will be done would be around 13 meters. For ships that are 60,000 tons range, you will need a depth of 17 meters dredging, and that will increase the cost and actually the size of the project and all those things. And as Commodore Vasan mentioned, that most of the commercial, movement is by container ships. You will not be able to bring container ships, whether it is 13 meters or 17 meters, because those are 150,000 tons kind of situation. So it does not actually make sense that way. I have another mariner here in the audience who has asked a question, and I would not actually do justice by reading his question. I'm going to ask Saptarishi Basu. Saptarishi Basu, can you, come on the camera and give your question? I'm pretty sure Commodore Vasan would be happy to answer.
Good evening, sir. Jai Hind. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Sir, what I was thinking, is since I was intimately connected with this project because I was a part of DCI industry. And DCI actually went under when the project was done. This is point number one. Secondly, sir, if you talk about the maritime geopolitical aspect, 90% of the trade which goes to the what we call the blue ocean superhighway is along the 9th degree latitude. Okay, sir. And we have two most important critical group of islands, the Lakshadweep and the Andaman Nicobar. So as a nation, our strategic interest, if you go by Admiral Rousseau Castex or Admiral Wolfgang Wagner's ideology of geopolitical, geographical determinism, we should focus on 90 degree latitude parallel rather than cutting our own maritime heritage and basically making a pathway, giving the Sri Lanka complete actual island status by giving a waterway across it. Notwithstanding the fact that we are destroying our own archaeological heritage, and secondly, there have been news that there may be even thorium deposits and etc. near those areas. Another very important thing which I would like to discuss with the audience is India is home to the largest hydrated methane in the subcontinent, sir. So if we are basically doing dredging operation, we will be destroying the flora, fauna, and also the hydrated methane deposits in that area. So that is what my focus was, that if we want to be geopolitically relevant, we should focus on 90 degree latitude. Why come closer to home and become inland or let us say sublittoral in prospect? We should go blue waters. I rest my case, sir.
Commodore Vasan, any response?
Yeah, thank you. I think all valid observations that have been made by Mr. Saptarshi. It is very clear that this does not have much of a utility with the modern day shipping that we are looking at. A point that's been well made earlier also. Like you correctly have said, there will be phenomenal amount of environmental degradation and damage done to the biosphere, both in the Parkway as well as Gulf of Mannar. So there is no need to invest in this at all, which is I think the larger concept today. Maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or in 1860 when it was envisaged, the draft of the ships that transited was quite less. Today, looking at modern ships which do 20 knots with some 24,000 containers on board, that will not go through this, and therefore the kind of money, since you say you also have experience with DCI, you know the kind of money that goes into dredging each cubic meter of sand. And if you are going to do it in this area, and if you want to increase the depth from 13 meters to 17 meters or 20 meters, there is phenomenal amount of dredged material that has been dumped somewhere. Where are you going to dump it? Obviously, you're going to take it to a deeper water and try and dump it there, but the kind of damage that would cause is something that has to be established again. So, by all counts, yes, you are right. Today, the sea lines of communication which are there, which carry something like 10,000 odd ships, is something 60 to 70,000 ships every year. They all are already doing the 20 knots today. Today, merchant ship does not do 12 knots or 13 knots as in the past. Most of them are doing 20 knots. And this is on established sea lines of communication. So today, if you are looking at the important ports in India, on one side you are looking at Tuticorin, which is in the Gulf of Mannar, and then you are looking at other new ports which are coming up on the east coast. So maybe there has to be a strategy to reroute some of this. So what's coming from the west, Middle East, etc., could go to Tuticorin without rounding Sri Lanka, and what is to come on the east side would be to Ennore, to Calcutta, to Paradip, to other ports. Maybe you can have another port. The Colossal, when it comes up, would be another port. So, I think it is restructuring of the entire system of ports, infrastructure, connectivity, taking into account the kind of expansion that will take place in future. So, all your points are valid. I endorse your recommendation, which is the bottom line of the moderator also, to say that let's dump this now and stop worrying about spending so much of money on a useless project.
Sir, also I would like to say one last thing, sir. We just forgot to mention the Vizhinjam project, sir, which is a very significant port which is coming up. So that will change the entire geopolitics and geoeconomics near the Kerala side of the peninsula. So the Vizhinjam project, when it comes through, then there is no need of such canals.
Yeah, the unfortunate part about Villingam is that it's been politicized, and every day you see protests, and the fishermen, are in hands and glove with the CPI, and therefore, that as it happens in any democracy, some of these, even though they are viable and very important for the national security strategy, they don't take off. It's been facing race, despite the court orders, etc. So Villingam will take some more time. Yes, you are right that it has that kind of a potential to be a deep water port, which will meet our multiple needs. But the point is that it's been politicized. So once we are able to get rid of the objections and conventions and the fishermen protests, we will be able to take this forward. Till that time, I suppose, try to
I'm
coexist
going
with
to
the
take
existing
one
system.
last question since we are running out of time. And this last question is from Dr. Tej Parikh. Today's roundtable with eminent speakers have convinced us the threats of SethuSamudram shipping canal project. Do you see it as a current government failure, ignorance or negligence about history, social sentiments and border security of India? So actually using my moderator's prerogative, I'm going to answer this question. Answer to this question is yes to all of those. Commodore Vasan told us very explicitly that in early 2000 he supported this project and got in touch with former president also about his paper, and he told me personally, and he said it openly today, that he revised his thinking at this point in time and does not want to support this project on all these grounds. So there is not one argument that goes against scrapping this project. There are multiple arguments, and people who are on political grounds or commercial grounds are trying to resuscitate or revive the idea of this project are not doing nation a service. And I have no qualms in saying that this project must be shelved permanently, because for a nation state, the most important thing is existence of the nation state, its security, its survivability. And if anything that poses a permanent risk to the nation's existence, its survival, its security, strategic threats, you don't want to bring international arbiters between Sri Lanka and India, Indian southern coast, permanently there, putting their, monitoring vessels and things like that, if the issue goes to UNCLOS. So yes, various governments have erred. They have not been myopic. My personal view, and if the government of India is listening to me, is to shelve this project, put it in cold storage forever. There's no need for this project, period. And with those comments, I'm going to end this discussion, which has been very useful. We wanted to focus not on emotional issues, not on religious divide. We wanted to really discuss the terrorism, counter-terrorism, maritime security, and geostrategic challenges. That was our effort. And I can say that we had a very good discussion with our three distinguished panelists. I'm very thankful to all of them. I know that Professor Nalapat had to go very sort of, early and could not participate in discussion, but he is, has his limitations being in South Pacific Islands, etc. I'm highly thankful to our audience at this point in time, who have patiently listened to this, roundtable discussion. I know that there will be a lot more questions. If we have unlimited time, I could allow more questions, but in the interest of time, we are coming to an end of this discussion. Thank you very much to the audience, and thank you very much indeed to Team CSA, Mr. Rapudaman Pachori, Mr. Rajiv Verma, and Mr. Ankush Bhandari, who are the team that helped me, arrange these discussions, roundtable discussions. Our next event would be on February 25th. That would be a distinguished lecture. And I can share with you, it's not been advertised, but it will be by Professor Reshmi Khazi on universal nuclear disarmament, considering the risk of nuclear warfare, which has resurfaced under current strategic environment. So till February 25th, goodbye, namaskar, and I'm going to end this discussion.
Thank you very much.